Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I've got 3 more true Bigfoot encounter stories to share with you. First off, a man driving home from work in Fairbanks, Alaska spots a strange creature along the roadway. Next, a mother and daughter have a terrifying experience near Island Swamp, Mississippi, and then 2 elk hunters have a harrowing encounter with a tall bipedal creature near Chalk Creek, Utah. You don't want to miss this one. So buckle up, grab your gear, let's ride back to Bigfoot country.
Number 1. Dear Tattooed Biker, I saw Bigfoot once, and I'll never forget the experience. It was the month of July in 2009 here in Fairbanks. I was heading south on Auburn Drive toward Farmer's Loop, which was about 1 mile away. It's a wooded area frequented by homes and, in general, would be considered populated. Houses are on average about 100 to 200 feet apart, with only the general area around and close to the homes cleared out. Most of the spaces is wooded. It was this section of road where it passes by Pearl Creek Elementary School. The school can be seen through the woods. Some of the woods in the area are pretty thick, and in some places you can't see into them for more than about 10 or 15 feet, but in this particular area it had been recently cleared, and sight lines into the section of the siding were very open. The school and vegetable garden could be seen off to the right from the road I was on, and it was about 6 p.m., and I was heading home after a day of work on a deck that I was building. The weather was clear with the sun high in the sky. As I was driving, I just happened to notice a man standing off by the right side of the road, about 100 yards up ahead. It was more of an unconscious recognition because, well, there's nothing really unusual about a man standing on the side of the road in this area. As I got to within about 50 yards, I took a closer look. "That's no man," I said to myself. Shortly after that, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, this thing just bolted into the woods toward the school. It did it like a wild animal would do if it were spooked. I didn't slow down until I got to the place where I saw him go up into the wood line, which is where I stopped. I could see him running away from the road, and when he was into the woods, about 30 yards or so, he turned left and was now running parallel to the road in the direction that I was heading. I got a pretty good look at him, but not his face. I could have probably seen his face had I not been so mesmerized by the sheer presence of this thing. I was just busy noticing other things. For one thing, he was covered in fur or hair that looked to be about 3 or 4 inches long all over the main part of his body. It was a reddish, rusty color. I was mildly struck by just how red it was, but it was definitely very rusty. He was about 8 feet tall and looked to weigh about 400 pounds. He ran with a strange, hoppy kind of run. It wasn't a limp for sure, but with one foot he would push off like a normal running move. But with the other foot, when he pushed off, it propelled him upward and forward. I watched him until he disappeared into the woods. There was a road about 100 yards ahead, and I took off to get to it so I could turn right, and in 20 yards turn right again. This road that led into the school parking lot. So basically, the wooded area that he was in was sort of a peninsula, and he seemingly had to be in there somewhere. The woods I was looking into from that angle were quite thick, and I didn't see him, and haven't seen him since. A little farther up on the right was the school garden that had people in it, which I'm now sorry that I didn't stop to go talk to them about what I'd seen. The next day, as I was driving into work on the deck, I naturally slowed down in the area where I saw him. And I was surveying the area when a couple walking their dogs were approaching. I flagged them down and told them the story of what happened that evening before, and They told me that about a week before that, they were there with their dogs and were on the way other side of the school property by the soccer field when 3 kids came running over to them, saying, "Did you see the Bigfoot? Did you see the Bigfoot?" They also said that what appeared to be a dad was with them, who didn't seem real excited about it. My conclusion to whether it was real or not is simply summed up by saying it was either very real or there was a man in a very, very convincing costume. I actually reported the sighting to the Fish and Game office in Fairbanks a few days later. The person who was taking the report was sort of rolling his eyes through the whole thing, and he seemed to be writing it down on a piece of scrap paper. I even had to remind him to take my phone number, just in case. Then I stumbled on your channel, and I thought I would share it here. Thanks, Biker. Signed, Daniel. Number 2. Dear TB, I had a really frightening experience once that I wanted to share and see what you think. It happened when my mother and I had taken my young Doberman to the Honey Island swamp to let him run and get some exercise. We had driven to the end of the road where the bridge had collapsed and you couldn't go back any further by car. The area is a few miles from the Honey Island exit off of Interstate 59 here in Mississippi. The road was built up about 8 feet from the ground since it flooded back there. The area around the road was swampy and filled with trees. The ground was covered in leaves since it was fall. We had been there about 10 minutes and my dog had been pretty much just staying on the road as he ran around. I went to get something out of the car, and when I started walking back to where my mom was on the road, she was looking out into the wooded area at something. She pointed out what appeared to be something dark beside a large cypress tree. We couldn't make out a head, but it appeared to be gray or black, fur-covered torso. Whatever we were looking at was absolutely huge because it stood above some bushes, and the top part was behind the branches of a tree. It had to have been well over 7 feet tall since the bushes were at least 4 feet tall. It was definitely not another tree because you could see the texture was so different from the big tree it was standing next to. It was right around 1 p.m. and the sun was bright. The light was dappled through the tree cover, but we could see that it was shining off what appeared to be hair or something with a hairy texture. It also seemed to be shifting back and forth, almost swaying nervously, as if you were to shift your weight from one leg to another. It was probably only 50 feet away from us, so we got a real good look at it. We didn't hear or smell anything, and my dog didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. After looking at it for at least 2 or 3 minutes, we got very uncomfortable all of a sudden. I actually got chill bumps, even though it was a warm, sunny day, and we decided that we would drive a mile or so up past one of the bridges on the way back to the interstate. We put my dog in the car and we drove at least a mile up the road before we stopped again to let my dog back out. When we had been there about 5 minutes, we heard heavy footsteps in the woods and snapping branches. We could hear whatever it was getting closer. This time, my dog quickly picked up on the sound and became alert. We could hear it stop, and then move forward a few steps, and then stop again. We couldn't see anything, but my dog was definitely trying to figure out what he was hearing. We got that same uncomfortable feeling again, but much more intense. The chill bumps returned, so we loaded up again, and this time drove up to where there are some nature trails and a shooting range, probably a full 2 miles up the road. We got out of the car again and weren't there but just a few minutes when we heard what sounded like something huge running through the woods towards us. At that point, my dog got so scared that he bolted back to the car, actually hit the closed car door to try and get back in. My mom and I ran to the car, and all 3 of us got out of there as fast as we could. We never saw what was making the noise in the woods, but whatever it was big enough to make a lot of noise, both walking and especially running through those woods. After leaving and having a major discussion about what had happened, my mom and I finally decided to get up our nerve and go back to the end of the road later that day. It was about 4:30 p.m. by that time, to see if what we had seen earlier was still there. When we got there, we couldn't find what we had seen before. We're pretty sure we saw what was the same big tree, but we didn't see what was standing by it originally. And we weren't nearly brave enough to go into the wooded area for a closer look. So we basically left with even more questions than we started out with. We never had a clear view of what we saw, but what we heard definitely scared us. Thanks for letting me share. Signed, Rhonda. Number 3. Hey TB, I have at least what I think is a Bigfoot sighting to report, and I'd love your viewers' input. You see, I was hunting elk with my brother-in-law up in Chalk Creek. That's in Summit County here in Utah. We had been in this deep canyon for some time, and it was getting dark, so we were headed out of it. I can still see all of this in my head clearly. We were climbing up out of a small draw onto a flat meadow. As we got to the top of it, we got smacked in the face by this horrible, rotten garbage, musky smell. Right before, we both saw something very tall and black in color run into a small stand of pine trees. And it let out a huge woof sort of sound as it went in. Also, it used long, powerfully built arm to sweep a pine bough out of its way that flipped from the ground to about 5 feet in the air. My brother-in-law said, "What the heck is that?" as he chambered a shell. This stand of pines was no bigger than a front yard, and there was a clearing behind it. Now, I've thought on this for a long time, and I think that because we could smell it so strong, we must have been downwind of it, so it didn't catch our scent before we came in contact with it. And so we ended up surprising each other. The creature was to our left, and we had a beaver dam to our right. The thing was about 30 feet away from us in the pines. We were on a deer path between the pond and the pines. We backed up, and when we did, this thing let out a low, guttural growl at us. It was so deep I could feel it rattle in my chest, and you could actually hear its teeth chatter at the end of the growl. Now, I've felt fear before in my life, but not anything like this. It's like a sense of pure evil came over me. On the way home, we talked about what we had seen. We were so close to this thing. I know for a fact it wasn't a bear or a moose. A bear doesn't move that fast on its hind legs. And I used to work at Lagoon in Farmington. It's an amusement park, and I used to feed the animals down there. They had a leopard that would growl at you when you walked by its cage, and the growl was almost like what I heard on that mountain. I've been in the hills all my life, and I've never seen or heard anything like that before, and, well, I hope I never do again. Thanks. Signed, Art. And there it is. 3 true reports of what I and the witnesses believe were sightings of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So what did you think about these encounters? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses who were courageous enough to share their experiences. And if you have a story that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description, and, well, your experience might just wind up in a future episode. Anyways, thanks so much for riding with me tonight. And as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.